Hello. Once again, you've dialed into Numinous Wind, and my name is Brother John. Today, we are going to try to take on a few subjects that kind of sort of all go together. Um, and this may run into a few more segments, but I'm going to try to get as much as I can into the 30 minutes that we have today. These are kind of topics that sort of go together, and I will kind of introduce them as we go. The first one is, who are the chosen people? The Bible talks about the chosen people both in the Old Testament, the New Testament. There's a lot of talk within books and whatnot about who the chosen people were, who the chosen people are, and so on and so forth. And it creates a whole lot of confusion, for one thing, and it creates a whole lot of national uh, tension. Let's put it that way. Maybe within the context of, say, anti-Semitism, that kind of thing. Are the Jews the chosen people? I think we need to define what we mean when we say Jew. And just by starting off like that, I can see that this is not going to be an easy discussion because that's a complicated road. Um, Let me just suffice to say, without going into all that depth, and maybe we will at another date, but let me try to make this as simple as possible. In the book of Galatians, it talks about the Israel of God. The Israel of God. I don't have it in front of me right now, but we can look it up later. Just go to your concordance and look up the Israel of God. And there's a statement in the book of Galatians where it makes this reference to what seems to be the church, and it's calling her the Israel of God. And the question has been for a long time, who or what is the Israel of God? So is Israel a physical people, or is Israel a spiritual concept? Or is it a little bit of both? Now, that being said, who are the chosen people? Simply stated, ultimately the divine, and I'm careful here because I don't want to say the word God because it's going to throw people off because many people have a certain concept within their minds when we say that word, God. I personally use the word sometimes within various conversations with friends and family and whatnot, uh, but I don't mean the word the way that most people use it. I actually prefer to use the word the sacred or the divine or something like that. Um, those two can be misunderstood, okay? But just please understand, this is where an enormous amount of confusion takes place, is within this understanding between one person that uses the word God and another person that uses the same term, and so on and so on. And truth be told, there's probably as many definitions of that word God as there are people. So we have to be really careful, because based on who we are as individuals, we have certain we have certain ways of seeing things, right? And it's true that even though it seems as though that when we all talk about God, we're all on the same page, but oftentimes we're not. So let's continue. Who are the chosen people. Simply stated, the chosen people are the ones who have woken up to the reality that this divinity is around us, among us, within us, about us, all pervading, virtually everywhere, within, out in space, a million galaxies out, everywhere. Okay? The chosen are the ones that wake up to their very deepest identity within that realization. Perhaps at one time, there were a handful, and I have to be careful, maybe a handful, maybe even one or two here and there, within what we sometimes call the Old Testament, or what our Jewish brothers call the Torah. Um, but the chosen or the elect, and there might be some other terms in there, are the ones who have realized this truth. Now, we have to be careful because now that we've defined that the way that it should be defined, now we have to stop and ask ourselves, well, what is everybody else talking about? Right? You've got the Jews who have been saying for thousands of years that they are the chosen people. Within Christianity, if you go into Galatians, I don't remember exactly where it's at. I don't have my Bible turned to that particular section right now, but I'm aware of it from my earlier studies, that there is a reference to the Israel of God. And this reference to the Israel of God is pretty clear that it's talking about the church. So the question becomes, who is Israel? Is Israel a national identity, or is Israel a spiritual identity? Okay. So this is where we get a little bit mixed up when we start talking about the chosen or the elect people of God. Okay. But again, it is really important to understand that if you're talking about this whole concept of this chosen one kind of thing, it has a tendency to kind of tick people off because it sounds pompous, arrogant, screwy. Surely we can understand this, you know. And when Jesus comes along and talks about being the Son of God, or the equivalent of the Father, that must have sounded really screwy. And it did. In fact, they killed him over it. What was he saying? What was he implying? This is my point. He was implying that he was an anointed one. He was a chosen one. So when we use this word chosen, chosen is, I personally don't really like the word because it really messes with people's heads and gets us in this wrong mode of thinking. Okay. But let me try to put it in perspective. The whole idea of being chosen is an ongoing progression. It is not something, let me put it another way. We are all chosen, okay? But there is a progression in the way that these quote unquote chosen people, there is a progression in the way that they are, I'm going to use the word arriving. And that's not a good word, but for right now, I'll use the word arriving. There's a progression in the way that they are arriving into their awakened state. And I'm trying to be really careful how I say this because I don't want to start getting into deeper stuff. There is some implicit, there is an implicit topic that I'm referencing here. But again, I don't want to get too far off where we're off on a rabbit run in some other direction. But the idea of being chosen is not something that is within the idea that you're chosen and you're not. Doesn't work like that. The idea of being chosen simply means that you belong to the universe. We've talked about this before. You are the universe. And here comes the key word, when you suddenly wake up to the reality of that, then your chosenness becomes active. That being said, we can think of chosenness as kind of dormant, I guess you could say, right? And then that moment comes along. Could be in your childhood, could be in your 30s, could be in your 70s, right? That comes along, and then you are a realized being. Now, again, I'm trying really hard to stay away from the implied topic. Surely there's questions that, say, well, wait a minute. What if I live my whole life and I'm 105 and I still haven't, had this experience that you're talking about, right? Um, like I said, I have the answer to that question, but if I so much as say the word reincarnation, it's going to cause a whole lot of problems. That is a huge topic, and we're going to have to cover that in another segment. Just because, again, the minute I say it, all kinds of misunderstanding happens, and we're going to have to take this on as a topic within itself. But yes, you're right. Um, if a person lives to be under 105, and let's say they lived a really, you know, corrupt life, when they were younger, and, let's say they spent many years in prison or whatever, and then they get to the end of their life, and then suddenly they have this boom, this huge mystical moment. Well, okay, that's great. Suppose they die in prison and they never have any mystical moment, right? Well, then, are they gone? Are they lost? Are they in hell? There's all these questions that come into play, and there's all kinds of beliefs regarding this. Okay? It has taken me a very long time to embrace the concept of reincarnation. In fact, that above every aspect of what I teach was, for me, the most difficult to embrace. Not so much because of the nature of it. It actually makes perfect sense when you begin stacking everything together and you listen to your intuition and you back it up with intuitions of others and the thousands of books that are written. um, it becomes extremely clear. But like I said, for me to just say so is not good enough. There are many that are watching this that are in the shoes that I was in, maybe, I don't know, 14, 15 years ago, uh, where we come from a thick background. Maybe we were fundamentalist or evangelical, or maybe we were Catholic or Lutheran or, whatever. And our understanding has always been that when we die, we go to heaven or we go to hell. Now, these days, we don't hear a whole lot of people talking about hell anymore. It's mostly about heaven. Um, but even those terms are greatly misunderstood. And in another segment, I really want to somehow tie this whole thing together so we have a clear understanding of what exactly are we talking about when we talk about heaven, hell, reincarnation, and all of these other topics that are kind of related to what is a ghost, what is a spirit, what is a soul. I think we talked a little bit about soul and spirit in a recent segment. But all of these things go together, and it's not the kind of thing that I can just sit down and just, you know, knock everything out within the half hour that we spend together. Um, I don't know how we're doing on our time right now. There was actually a number of things that I wanted to cover. So first and foremost was this whole business of being chosen. Um, Maybe I should just stop right there because I do have some other things that I want to talk about. But I'm afraid that if I get going on these other things, then I might lose you. Or maybe my, you know, time will have to come to a close and I'll have to go to work or something. So, recapping, today we've been talking about chosen. What does it mean to be chosen? If a person is chosen, let me come at that from a different direction. That word, I really don't like that word at all. There's certain words, and maybe you can resonate with me on this. There's certain words in the English language that just, they have that certain taste, right? Chosen is one of them. Don't like that word. Religion, I don't like that word either. And there's other words that are just, you know, right? I talked about the word God earlier. That's another one. Don't get me wrong, you know, Don't get me wrong. It sounds horrible to tell you I don't like the word God, but it's what it implies. What does the word God imply? What does the word chosen imply? Right? And there's lots of other words. Religion, what does religion imply? Right? Here's another one. There's a whole bunch of them. Truth. Truth, right? What does truth imply? You say you have the truth, and then another person says they have truth, and then they have another person that has another, they got their truth, and so on and so on and so on, and everybody's got truth. Guess what? It renders the whole idea of truth as no truth. This is another topic that we're going to be talking about in the near future, this whole concept of truth. Many of these words that we're talking about today can be referred to as misnomers. What is a misnomer? Misnomer is a word that we commonly say, but when we sit and we actually think about it from a subjective perspective, it doesn't make a bit of sense at all. This is what we call a misnomer. Right? There's lots of words that are misnomer. In the last segment, for instance, I talked about the word normal. What the heck is normal? That's another misnomer. There's a whole bunch of them. Maybe you can come up with a few for yourself. I think we're about out of time for today, but just we got to be careful with the words that we use uh, and our understanding of the way that we interpret the words of others. Sometimes we don't mean the same thing. And I think that with an understanding of this, even when we read scriptures, because of this problem with these kinds of words, it really, really screws us up. So much so that now we've got 30,000 denominations. This is a crime, okay? Everything is misunderstood. There is a lack of communication, a lack of understanding, and ultimately, when all's been said and done, a gross lack of understanding within this topic of spiritual awakening. In the next segment, I think I would like to talk a little bit about something that I have been seeing a lot of online. Um, Maybe it's because of all the havoc that's going on in the world today. I don't know. It seems like every time things start getting heated up in our world, people start putting out this kind of stuff. And I'm starting to see it again. It just comes up everywhere. It's on the internet. I see it in books about it and, blogs and whatnot. What are you talking about, Brother John? I'm talking about the topic of the Antichrist. Who is the Antichrist? What is the Antichrist? Let's talk about that in the next segment. Until then, I'm Brother John, and you have tuned in to Numinous Wind. Have a nice day.